I'm Anjali.
I'm Mukesh.
And no prizes for guessing, Debjani.
So when Vani reached out to invite us to speak on this very interesting topic, at least it gave me a few seconds of pause. Why are we talking about assertive leadership? Aren't all leaders assertive after all? And then the question, of course, is very valid. Is assertive leadership an option that is comfortable and acceptable for women? There are many, many leadership styles. We all assume that, of course, leaders have to be confident and bold and open to communication and thus assertive. But recognizing that the journey to leadership actually goes through many stages. So we can sit here and say, yeah, of course, it's fine. But there are many situations that occur in the workplace when in the early to mid years, as a, let's say, a woman employee is going through the ranks, she may feel that she does not actually have the option to exercise assertive leadership. So with that in mind, we are going to share a few ideas and thoughts here. We are going to look at some personal examples. We are going to take the perspective of an employer and what is expected from women in these roles, and certainly then also bring in what is the responsibility of the organization. So with that in mind, I will first turn over to Mukesh. Mukesh has been a great champion of diversity in the organizations that he has led and has managed a very diverse workforce. So,
Thanks, Anjali. I'll start by saying I think the fact that all of us are in the room, talking about this topic, that itself is a great start. I think we're chatting, outside this room. It's sometimes a very complicated topic. Some people don't even pay attention to this. In my personal journey, I think just my sensitivity and awareness increased tremendously over the last 10 years. I was almost probably, just blissfully ignorant. I would have probably denied that they are different, or would have grabbed out just very simple challenges, about, different requirements and things people do for increasing diversity in the workplace. But when it comes to leadership, there are some, I think, fundamental, deep challenges. The way I process it, it's, it starts with the top leadership teams. Most of the top leadership in the, historically and now is very heavily males. And, we all know that, the men and women think differently, process things differently, intuitive thinking versus logical or whatnot. There are different way of approaching a problem. Now, in any environment, in order to blend in and to succeed, you have to be similar to what the majority is. And that just leads to a huge ripple effect across the organization, that certain kind of behavior, approach is rewarded, other is not. I see an example for all the time, shows up in a meeting. If you just look around most meetings, a lot of women, employees, whether it's a junior level, mid-level, they usually tend to be quieter, definitely not, assertive or standing up for their point of view strongly. And occasionally when some of them do, it's not always seen the same way like it's seen for, it can very easily be, I have actually an example I've seen, in my own company where a certain behavior, it's coming from a male employee, it will be initiative taker, assertive, willing to go against the grain, willing to fight the system, great person, promote him. Same thing from a women employee, it's probably not very collaborative, not willing to listen, not figuring how to blend in, how to, work the system. It just things are seen differently. And I'm sure a lot of you are smiling, right? So probably you've seen it firsthand or, experience. But it's very difficult even where do you start? I mean, the best I can think of right now, you start by just starting a dialogue around this. I think the more and more events like this, when you go back to your respective organization, just encouraging, dialogue in your organization where people start to just pay attention and bring attention to small things. I think it will probably take a long time. I don't think we should expect any miracles overnight. But we'll talk more about it in a session. I'll let Debjani, share her thoughts on this.
Thanks, Mukesh. I'm going to share a personal experience, right? So I was born and brought up in a very large extended family. And I had 12 older boys or brothers, right? And as I was growing up, my dad not only believed that I was equal to all of them, but he very, very strongly believed I was better than all of them. And it was something I believed from day one, okay? Because when you constantly keep hearing that, of course you believe in it. So I grew up and my natural style was to lord over my brothers, right? It was, I wouldn't think twice about it. It was extremely natural thing for me to do. And I did it beautifully, right? So by the time I was grown up, through school, through college, frankly, that style benefited me tremendously. And I never ever stopped to think that I was doing something wrong or it was something bad, because I was always the head prefect or, leading the debate team. That style got me the things I wanted. And then I was always the first to raise my hand and always the first to be called up. So I never ever stopped to think that it was bad. And then I started working. First few years when I was an individual contributor, it was okay. In fact, it was getting me noticed. It was getting the work done. I moved up the ranks pretty quickly, got my first management role. And then all of a sudden, I became a bad person. All of a sudden, my reviews changed from go-getter and great and all of that to she doesn't work well with people, she intimidates people, scares people. And I was like, what is going on? Because I haven't changed anything. This is who I have been at that point for maybe, I started working around 20s. So I was like, this is who I was for 20 years of my life. What changed? And this was not coming from the men in my group alone. In fact, the men in my group were not complaining that much. It was the women in my group who were complaining a lot more. And this is where I, honestly went through a major struggle for the initial few years because I couldn't figure it out. It was like, how can this be bad? I'm not being personal. I'm not being abusive. I'm just being very direct about getting the work done, which is my natural style. I'm being very direct about what I want. So how can this be bad? We have these performance reviews in management, and again and again and again, I was getting the same feedback. You're too aggressive. You need to tone down. Went through this cycle quite a few times. And then when you're young, you make a lot of foolish mistakes. One foolish mistake I made was one day decided, I can't handle it anymore. I'm going to try and be a different person. And I tried really hard. I tried keeping quiet in meetings. I tried a whole lot of other things that I thought were expected from me. All of a sudden, I started hearing words like, she's lost interest. She's become timid. I started hearing all these terms. So it was like, damn. You are doomed if you do, and you're doomed even more if you don't do. So what's the balance, right? And this is where I really, really value the power of mentorship, because this is the time when mentors come to your rescue. And I had lots of chat with my mentors, and it was, I remember, a male mentor who sat me down and said, the problem is not you. The problem is the people you're working with and the expectations they have of your gender. And you are absolutely not mapping to any of those expectations. But this is where I challenge you to go back to your manager, to go back to HR, and start bringing this up. Don't take it lying down. Start asking these questions. Where's the problem? Are you having the same conversation with a male colleague who's as assertive and ambitious as I am? Are you? Why are you apologizing for being yourself? Why are you apologizing for being ambitious? Why are you apologizing for being assertive? And these are the conversations that really helped. And I took it to heart. I actually started having those conversations with not just my manager, with HR, but with colleagues. And, they say that slowly things start changing. And the one thing that helps change, which at least in my example, what I learned, is be true to yourself. Because after all this, after going through the ups and downs and trying to be someone different, I realized I can't fake it. At least I can't fake it in a sustainable way. I can fake it for a day or two. I can fake it in one meeting or two meetings, but I cannot fake being someone I am not day to day to day. And employees form opinions about you not in meetings. It's the hallway conversations. It's the water cooler conversations. Can't keep faking every moment, right? So that's when I realized I have to just be true to myself. I have to be who I am. And just have those dialogues so people at least know that this is who I am. And they know that this is the style, and this is also the style. The other thing I realized and learned early was if your style results in success, people will accept it a lot faster. Right? And as success started building up, people were happy with the styles and stuff. So, just learning from my experience, I have just two things to say. One is you have to be true to yourself because that's what brings out the best in you. And leadership is all about being the best version of yourself. That's my biggest learning. It is about being who you are and doing the best possible job for the team, for the company, bringing the best value to the table. Be true to yourself. And when you are faced with these problems, talk. Challenge it. I didn't challenge it for quite a few years because I assumed I was wrong because there were 10 fingers pointing at me. So I just assumed all 10 were right. Until somebody woke me up and said, go and have this dialogue with your manager in HR, right? So challenge it. And one of the questions to ask is, would you be having the same conversation with the guy next door who's pretty much behaving the same way maybe? It makes your managers think because it's not that they want to harm you, but sometimes maybe they're not thinking through it. So that's the experience I have, and I'm going to turn it over to Anjali to talk a little bit more maybe about organizations and what they can do.
I'll ask you a question actually. Maybe just building upon Debjani, what you were saying, right? So for you, let's say in some ways leadership came naturally because how you grew up, the environment you were in, right? But that may not be the case for majority of women. Now, if you're a leader, and when Anjali will ask you a question, you can touch upon that. What can organization do or a leader do? Both men and women leader, let's assume the majority of women are naturally, let's say, not likely to be equally assertive, but they have equally or better ideas about what needs to be done or contribute. So how should one approach it? In one way, say, ask everyone to become assertive and aggressive and so on, right? Probably not very scalable solution, right? Partly, you said, be yourself. And if I said, most of the people in the room stay true to themselves, they're likely not to be faking, being assertive, right? So how do we engage those folks more, right? Maybe Anjali, you can maybe share your thoughts.
So before I go to organization, I'll speak about a couple of sort of personal thoughts as well and experiences. Because you asked the question on does everyone then become very assertive? I think if I were to just take a step back and say leaders actually have to be assertive. So it's not the what you do, it's the how you do it. So what is assertive? It means you have a point of view, you are confident, you state your point of view and you kind of stick to your guns and you make stuff happen. That is assertive leadership. Now, the question is how do you do it? And that's where style modulation comes in my view, and also modulating your style to your environment, to your organization culture. Many of you are entrepreneurs, so you're actually going to set the organization culture in your own companies. But if you are actually the receiver of a culture, so to speak, then either you modulate your style and become effective in that culture, or you opt out. That's the reality. And modulation of style doesn't mean that you're not true to yourself, certainly. First of all, you have to have integrity to yourself, and only then can you really be the best for your team, for your company, and so on and so forth. So it's the difference between what you do and what you get as an outcome and how you get it done. And sometimes you actually have to get it done through collaboration, through working through people, without breaking a lot of glass. And that's also a skill set. So personally for me, I've had the great fortune of working in companies and firms that have been highly meritocratic, where gender actually was somewhat left out the door, at least in the early years. I started my career at McKinsey and I don't think anyone cut you slack for being a woman or expected more for being a woman. You were just expected to do your work, do it well. It's only later on, as you kind of got into client service leadership roles, that you had to kind of figure out your engagement style with clients and so on. Specifically, organizations. I think organizations are eventually made of people too, right? So the biases and styles come through managers and peers and co-workers, and certainly it is incumbent on organizations today to be conscious of diversity and inclusion. And I don't mean it in a motherhood sort of way, but in an everyday sort of way. So why ask someone, man or woman? See, not everyone's going to be a leader in any organization. But if there is an expectation that a leader in my company, let's call it XYZ, needs to have certain attributes, then those attributes are equally applicable to a man or a woman. So it's kind of gender agnostic in my view. And yet, at the mid-levels, as women are growing in their careers, I don't think it's cutting slack or being creating sort of special situations, but it is incumbent on the organization and its leadership to be conscious and recognize different styles and make room for them.
Maybe just add to that, and Debjani, my minute, right? So one of the inputs I'll have, right, for especially like a lot of young women here is, I think it's the importance of what Debjani also touched upon, a good mentor, both either inside the company or outside the company. Sometimes what happens within the organization, the dialogue happens certain level, talking about performance or results, or I would say very superfluous advice. And it's not even the person's fault because no one is, talking about the real conversation. So I think somewhere probably you need to break the ice and start those conversations as well, that, as simple as that, I'm not able to speak of my mind in a meeting. And a lot before a performance appraisal happens. And you may not always find sympathetic ears, but you'll be surprised at how many people are also, even from manager's point of view, leaders' point of view, everybody wants like very strong workforce, there is strong, diversity in the organization. They want people to do well, really well-intentioned people, but they also don't know where to start the conversation. So it ends up happening very transactional. So if you feel something's holding you back, and you just reach out to folks in your organization, you may have to talk to 2, 3, 4 people, but sooner or later you'll find somebody who can really have the right conversation with you, like kind of conversation we're having here, right? And that can be the icebreaker. Then every time you can follow up on that and build upon that. And I mean, Anjali is absolutely right. Leadership eventually is about assertiveness, but assertiveness needs to be very individualistic. Whatever style that suits you, only then it's authentic and it's meaningful, right? People will relate to it.
And I want to sort of end, sum up with that, which is, what is assertiveness? To me, assertiveness is knowing what you want. It's knowing your mind. It's knowing your data and being able to stand up for your point of view. What is wrong in that? Or why do we call that a male characteristic? Don't we women know what we want? Don't we know we usually do a lot of homework. We know our data. Don't we stand up for a point of view? So I don't even get why it's called a male characteristic, but that is assertive. Assertiveness is often mistaken with aggression. Doesn't have to be. I know a lot of brilliant leaders, and not just women, but even men, who are extremely assertive, but will never raise their voice. But they can be tremendously firm. So I think it's about understanding what is assertiveness. As a leader, if you do not, and most of you, I believe, are on the verge of either starting your businesses or maybe have already started. If you don't know your mind, and if you can't stand up for your point of view, God help you, right? So it's a must-have characteristic. It's an absolutely must-have characteristic. But this is where you have to own it. And to own it, you have to figure out what your natural style is, and then make this yours in a way that you can live with it, right? So to me, this is sort of a must-have. Just figure out what you are comfortable with and own that style. And I'll hand over to Anjali for the last 2 minutes and sum up.
So I'll pick up on a few things that have actually already come up. Be true to yourself. You have to know who you are and work with that. You have to know what you want. I think Mukesh made a very good point about take charge. You take charge of your destiny. It doesn't have to be written for you. You can help write it yourself. And if you are feeling that you're not being heard or it's not an environment that's conducive, you have to take charge and problem solve around it. And eventually you always have the option, if it's not the right environment for you, you can opt out. Today's in today's world, there is an enormous war for talent. You are the precious commodity. The talent is the precious commodity. Seek mentors, get help. No harm in asking for help. I think it's something actually women do very well, is reach out and ask for help once we get past our diffidence and a little bit of insecurity. If I ask for help, will I be seen as not competent? No, you will actually, that's what most people do, and that's what mentoring is all about. More importantly, give help, because we are all on this journey, and it's not about just receiving help, but giving help. Demand more from your organization, demand more from your seniors, give more to your juniors, if you will. Find great leaders to work with, like Mukesh.
I'm not sure about that, but just want to add one last thought, which is I think just looking at this whole thing from a very different point of view, there is huge recognition in most organizations that the need for senior women leaders. I think people recognize that in some ways, both men and women leaders come at it differently. I think together, they're able to probably look at much broader picture and problem solve differently. So there's definitely a need and recognition for that. So in some ways, as a kind of women growing up in an organization, you can take advantage of that situation also. So be aware of that fact. I think things are different. If you are able to find right mentors, as I think both Anjali and Debjani said, speak your mind, let people know what you stand for, your point of view. I think there are a lot of opportunities. I can't tell you from at least the two companies I work for, what will we not give to have senior women leaders, in our respective organizations. And so India environment is becoming more conducive. It's also equally, if you look at the whole energy around lean in, right? It has become a global phenomena. So again, that's both acknowledgement of in some ways, the magnitude of challenge, but as well as that time is ripe for significant change in how people approach men and women in a workforce environment. So that's should take full advantage of that. And the organizations and individuals who are able to do it well, they'll end up creating, I think, significantly differentiated organization compared to, let's say, another average organization. So thank you, everyone.